And welcome to the virtual masterclass hosted by Avaana Capital in collaboration with Ag Grants. I am Srishti Parekh and I will be your moderator for today's session. We're hosting today's masterclass as a part of the Avaana-Startup India Niti Aayog Atal Innovation Mission Grand Challenge for Climate-tech Innovation. This one-of-its-kind initiative aims to identify and support climate-tech innovators and startups that are driving transformative innovations in clean technology, sustainable agriculture, deep tech, green manufacturing, etc. We invite climate innovators to apply for the challenge. You can find more information about the Grand Challenge across our LinkedIn handle. I'm also sharing the application link in the chat. We encourage startups building in climate tech to apply and get a chance to receive benefits such as monetary prizes, mentorship from industry leaders, and a chance to showcase at the Startup Mahakumbh, the biggest startup event in India. Coming back to the masterclass, the topic of today's session is Beyond the Breakthrough, Balancing Technology, Strategy, and Scale in Fundraising Narratives. This session will delve into how founders can craft a powerful narrative to attract investors and secure funding they need to scale their impact. The session will cover three core pillars of a strong fundraising narrative: technology, business model, and scale strategy. We'll discuss how investors assess technology and the risks associated with the overfocusing on the technical aspects. Additionally, we will explore key questions every founder must answer, including who your customer is, how your solution differentiates from your competitors, and what your revenue model looks like, and more. The session will also break down the four-part pitch story. What are you solving for? Why now? How to win? And what you need, helping you refine your approach to securing investment. To ensure a smooth session, I will request participants to kindly stay on mute. To make the session interactive, kindly submit your questions through the chat box and refrain from unmuting. I will collect all the questions and moderate as we go along. Our speaker for today is Ms. Alankrita Khera. Alankrita is a director at Ag Grants, where she helps ClimateTech investments with Act for Environment and leads the charge on the organization's platform strategy as a part of the leadership team. Alankrita, thank you so much for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Shrishti. And hi, everyone. Good to see you on a Friday afternoon. And hopefully this will be something that helps. So that will be my best effort. But in the meantime, if you folks can switch on your videos, that would be great. It would give me a sense of who I'm talking to. But I'll give you a quick sense of why I'm here. I'm Alankrita, as Shrishti pointed out. And yes, I've been at ACT for almost about 3 years now. Look at a lot of climate tech investments, etc. But I've had a very diverse sort of a career journey, if I may call it that. I actually started off not as an investor, though I've angel invested along the way, but I started off in media. And I worked on the business side for at media, at broadcast media more specifically, for almost about, I want to say, 10, 12 years, before pivoting into impact very specifically, and spent the next decade there. From there on, given climate is just such a huge problem that no amount of solutions can actually feel enough, at least at this point, felt like this is the place for me to be. So that's a bit about me. And the organization that I work for, in case you folks don't know, but we're essentially a grant funder. We do look at funding tech, we do look at funding startups, but it is non-dilutive capital. And our emphasis and our lens will always be not just the impact that these solutions can create today, but what is the impact at scale that it can create over time for the country at large. Before I quickly begin, I also want to introduce Shruti. Shruti, if you want to say hi.
Yeah, hello everyone. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Shruti is a part of my team, and she leads our investment team across all the verticals that we work in. So I asked her to join in because given all the work that she does with founders of the space, I'm sure she would be able to add a lot of nuance and perspective to whatever little I have to say. But if I were to frame this a little bit, there's a reason why I'm in climate tech, right? The sheer magnitude of opportunities that exist for innovation to really solve one of the most, what I feel is the most burning issue of the day. The innovators inspire me. That's what I spend my day-to-day doing. The science really fascinates me. And, the scaling dilemma does keep me up at night because it's not easy. Not just to create a solution, but to scale it takes a whole different amount of commitment and thinking. But it is a space that I personally feel requires more innovators, that's one, but also a higher influx of patient capital. It is a big problem. It does need more innovators like yourselves. But also, given that a lot of these solutions are long gestation, I feel like patient capital is the order of the day. But let's face it, fundraising is tough. And I am nobody to teach you that. You guys have probably been fundraising for a while, so you know this, especially when you're early stage. It's not easy to get capital right at the early stages. Getting the right amount of capital at the right stage from the right investor on the right terms is an ordeal often. So it's frustrating. And I hear those frustrations when I talk to a lot of these founders, and I get it. Because the single-minded narrative on everybody's mind is, why can't they see what I can see? Right? And I get where that comes from. But objectively, if I really had to think about it, when I speak to founders in my day-to-day, there are times when I feel like maybe that pitch doesn't do justice to their potential. It deep dives and double dives almost singularly into the technology, into all the technical aspects of that technology, which is great because they're the ones who know it the best. But it does leave their story, their journey, their vision fairly untold. And so sometimes, to be very honest, I can't see what they can see. Right? So for this hour today, I think what I'm going to attempt to do is just maybe collectively help us rethink about your fundraising pitches in a way that could maybe land better with investors. We'll take the session as we go. As Srishti said, if you have any questions, please do drop them in the chat and I'll try to address it at whatever pocket I can. But we will try and leave some time for Q&A at the end. So if I were to ask, since we just talked about putting things on chat, what's the one thing you are hoping for investors to walk away with after you make a pitch? What are you thinking that, this is what I want them to walk away with? Do put your responses on chat. Just want to hear a few thoughts. Opportunity. Okay. Others? Any other thoughts? Like, feel free to throw it out. Obviously, there are no wrong answers here. To give more time to understand the vision. Interesting. Very interesting, actually. Funding, not funding comes second. Okay. Anyone else? Throw out words, throw out things that you know you've dealt with. Excitement about our innovation. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you were to ask me, because I wear the investor hat, what you really want people to walk away with is conviction. You want them to walk away with conviction. It doesn't matter whether they're funding you right now, or they're funding you 6 months down the line, or maybe they're going to revisit the entire conversation 2 years later. Do they have conviction on you, what you're building, what you're hoping to be able to do, how you're going to change the world? To me, it actually single-mindedly boils down to this. And believe me, Shruti is on this call today, and a lot of times when we have these conversations, the question that we're really asking ourselves is, do we have conviction? Is it 50%, 70%? 100% usually nahi hota hai, but that's the question we ask ourselves. So if I had to now break it down further, where does this conviction really come from? At early stage, the first place it comes from is the founders. Who are you? And I'm not, at least personally, and I will say this from my personal perspective, I'm not talking about pedigree. I'm not talking about whether you went to Harvard or wherever. It doesn't matter. But who are you as founders? Are you the right type of founders? Are you in it for the long haul? Are you solving this because this really bothers you as a problem? Or is this something that you think is going to be interesting to do? Or we're really trying to gauge you. We're trying to get to know you. So it does actually come from founders in a very big way, especially early stage when there's no revenue, scale, growth, for you to throw at the table. Yes, it does come from the idea and the opportunity. And I say those two things together, right? So the idea, of course, is your product, your technology, your service model innovation, your whatever it is that you may call it, but also the opportunity that it presents, not just to create exponential climate impact, because that's the business we're in, but also to really disrupt the market. And finally, it comes from your vision. It's not about the here and now, actually. It is about where you think you're hoping to be in the next, whatever, X number of years. Who do you hope to be? Who do you hope for your startup to be? What is the not just the ripple, but the serious dent that you want to be able to create. We do want to know that. So if I had to really boil it down, when you think of your fundraising pitches, the decks that you send and the meetings that you have or the Zoom conversations that you have, that story, and I will call it a story and I will keep referring to it as a story throughout my little piece here, but that fundraising story is actually not just about what you've built. It's not just about your product, and it's not just about the plants that you're setting up, and it's not just about the technology. It's actually about why it matters and how will it win. Those are the three big things that we really do want to know. We walk into rooms excited to know more. We walk into rooms with like 1,000 questions in our minds. We walk into rooms wanting to hear your vision and to hear your story and your journey and how you think you're going to change the world. But it's not just about your product. So, and these are the three things that for this hour, I would just like you to keep at the back of your mind somewhere, right? Because keep correlating it to the decks that you've sent and the conversations that you've had, but we'll keep coming back to this. In my opinion, and different investors invest in different ways, different folks have different ways of looking at this, but just a breakthrough technology, and I'm sure it is breakthrough. You folks are in the space of hardcore innovation. But is it enough to build conviction to what I previously said? The answer is no. If I had to really break it down, what does a fundraising narrative really, really need to have? I would say it needs to have those three things. Yes, you're going to talk about your technology. It is possibly a groundbreaking innovation, something that nobody has ever seen before. And we've met some of those. And by the way, those are the conversations that leave me super inspired at the end of long, tedious days. But yes, you will talk about your technology. You'll talk about the problem that you're seeing. You'll talk about the big breakthrough that you've had in terms of your tech or your product or your model. You'll talk about how it's been validated. Absolutely. But you'll also talk about your model. You'll talk about the market, you'll talk about the size, you'll talk about the opportunity, you'll talk about how you're positioned amongst other people who might be trying to do the same thing at the end of all things. You'll talk about, is the market ready yet for what you're trying to build? And you have to be able to talk about scale. Because, like I said, it's not about the here and now. What seems very exciting, very incredible for you to have built today, what investors really want to know is, where is it going to go? So you do need to be able to talk about what's your roadmap to growth. And these are not obscure, obtuse, vision statements. These are things that we know as founders you've thought about. Because the reason you started up in the first place is not because you want to, be a nice little small business and take it forward. You want to be big. You want to be something incredible. So we know you've thought about this, but we want to be able to understand that from your lens. And really, what's your plan for financial sustainability? Because without sustainability, you do go into the valley of death. So your fundraising pitch, and I will keep this agnostic of deck or in person or whatever, but we are looking for these three things. Like I have essentially boiled it down to these three things. So again, yes, the technology is extremely important and it's mind-blowing. Like I'm the first person when I walk into rooms with founders, I actually do tend to do the research on their deck, try to find out what is this product, what is this tech. Yes, it really blows my mind in so many different ways because there are incredible innovations out there. But what's the real world problem that it's solving? And I know you folks have this in your minds, obviously, because otherwise you would not have done this at all. But I do find that sometimes decks don't have this. What is the problem that you're solving? And more importantly, why this now? Why is the time ripe for something like this now, to solve for this problem now? Because most of these problems have existed for a while. What makes you think that you need to be able to jump into solving for it now? So there's something that you've seen. We want to know about it. What's your customer's exact pain point? And I'm now being technology agnostic here, right? So if you're a battery recycling solution, you're probably talking to 2, 3 different types of stakeholders. If you're renewable energy, you're talking to somebody else. There's somebody who's your customer, right? Or a certain set of somebody's. What's their pain point? What is it that you know that they're feeling? And side by side, which is, I know, a logical question that jumps into my mind all the time. If the solution does not exist and you're the solution that is going to come and bridge that pain point, how are they currently solving it? They must be doing something. What are they doing? And that's not so much for, as an evaluation thing for founders, but more for us to understand what is it that founders are seeing that we're not seeing. And then what is the technology itself? Yes, how does it work? How does it work? right? And I will come to this, but this is not about how much density or how much gigaton and so on and so forth. But, break it down for me. How does it work? Talk to me like I'm 5. Because at the end of the day, you folks are the experts. I'm not. So tell me how it works. And more importantly, how will it solve the problem that you have identified, that pain point that you have identified, better than anyone else or anything else? So I'm not just talking about competition here, but I'm also talking about, let's say, there could be other alternatives, maybe not as good as what you've built, but other alternatives that perhaps your customer is already using, or other people that are building very similar things. How do you think, in your opinion, how will it do it better? What's the TRL? I mean, this phrase we've sort of heard and thrown out, and this I see on decks all the time. But while I've kept it there for good measure, because it's always good to know, I think the bigger question I will usually ask is it validated? Beyond your R&D, are there any pilots that you've done? Even if they're free pilots, do you have any feedback from those pilots? Are there any early sort of customers that you have that you feel like you want to be able to talk about? Any sort of market evidence that sort of tells you that, yeah, I'm on the right track. This makes sense. And how defensible is it? And this is the part which I think a lot of founders do get, right? They'll talk about their patents, they'll talk about their IPs. But I think what we're really trying to get to is, what is your competitive moat? Right? What is it? So to the second point that you see on the slide, third point, sorry, how are you doing this better? Like, what is it that only you can do and nobody else can? So these are all a list of things that I know we look for. I know I look for. Even before I get into the room with a founder, when I'm looking at that deck, or even when I'm in the room, I think these are the questions that are already boiling up at the top of my head. And I do want to be able to understand it from the founder's perspective. But here's actually what happens. Decks, in-person conversations, and obviously not all the time. It's not a generalization. I stay away from those. But these conversations, these narratives sometimes do get very, very technical. You see a lot of technical jargon in decks and in in-person conversations. And in effect, TLDR version of what happens is, what you want the investor to do is this. And what actually ends up happening is this. And sorry, this is my attempt at bad humor, because I really, really suck at humor. So let me call that out straight away. But I couldn't find a better representation for this, because I've been in some of those rooms. As much as I might understand the base, whatever of the tech, the minute it gets too technical, I'm actually not getting answers to the fundamental questions that I was hoping to be able to understand better. So why is this a problem? One, at a pitch deck stage, you're actually losing the opportunity to capture an investor or a funder's attention and their interest. You've lost it completely. Or maybe not completely. They're still sort of intrigued about what you're building, maybe because they know about the space that you're in already, and they want to find out more. But what you really want at the pitch deck stage is, you want them to want the meeting, not the other way around. You want the meeting. Yeah, of course you do. But you want the investor to be able to say, oh my God, I have to talk to this person. What are they building? Who is this person? I want to know more. So if you're getting too technical in your pitch decks, and hand to heart, maybe this is a question that you folks need to be asking yourselves, but I've seen many. Not that the solution was not great, or it was, in many cases, it was incredible. But at the time that I was looking at the pitch deck, it wasn't giving me the full picture at all. And at the in-person stage, where obviously the stakes are higher, this is time that you've got, and in your mind, you're like, I need to be able to find a way to crack this. And I hope that they walk away with, excitement about our innovation, as somebody called it out. It doesn't leave you space to tell your whole story, of which your technology is only a part. There is your model, there is your moat, there is your scale strategy, there is your custom. There's so much that you can talk about even at an early stage, when it's not all about numbers and revenue and, EBITDA and all of that. But you simply lose that opportunity. So if I were to simply put it, our solid state battery has 4 times more energy density, and I've got this in a pitch deck that I had received, is actually far less powerful than saying, hey, our battery technology innovation actually allows EVs to double their range at the same cost. Let me show you how. What you've done is you've at least captured my interest. You've said the right things. And now when you want to get into your tech, yeah, I want to know how it's going to double their range at the same cost. Okay, you've got my attention. So it's about saying the same things. I think that the point that I'm really trying to draw home, and this is drawn out of my experiences, but also some of the conversations that I've had with other investors over time, is you've got everything in your mind that you need to be able to say, you know this already. Otherwise, you would not be doing this in the first place. But I think by the time we get into fundraising conversations and decks, 80% of this is lost, at least in the first one. Maybe I'll go so far as to venture two conversations. How do we try to bring it back? You're the experts, you're the scientists, you're the innovators. We're not, at least not all of us are. Yes, there are some, and that's a whole different archetype of investor altogether, who actually is probably a scientist themselves or has been in the technical space themselves. I know many of those, but mostly not all of us are. So talk our language. Talk to us the way that you feel you want us to hear your story. Make it simple. Keep it simple. And here I do want to caveat, it's simple and not simplistic. Simplistic is trying to dumb something down, which you don't need to do, because finally, you are talking to fairly smart people at the end of the day. But make it simple for somebody who may not have come from that technical background to understand what is the opportunity that you're seeing. And yes, don't over-explain. It should be able to talk for itself. So essentially, how do you inspire them to really believe in what you're seeing? Because you are seeing a whole lot of things that we can't, not yet anyway. We want to be able to see what you see. But once you keep tech on one end, and this is the part that you guys know inside out, you do have to get to your business model fairly quickly. And why that's important is, if I were to take an example, and this is an intuitive question, right? Why is this important? Why is business model important? Yes, we all know a business model needs to be able to be talked about, but oftentimes what I've heard entrepreneurs say is, oh, market share. My TAM is this much and my SAM is this much. And if I manage like 1% of that, this is what we'll be able to crack. Often I've seen this in, let's say, slide 3 or 4 of pitch decks, or in the first, I want to say 10 to 15 minutes of the conversation. The problem with that is, at an early stage, for very genuine reasons, but also sometimes the way that we see it happening, there's often very little clarity on how you will get there. How will you get to the 1%? Okay, the numbers are great. Market opportunity, market sizing. This is great. Like, we love data. But how do you get there? How do you get there from where you are now to even capture that 1%? Usually that is missing. And we can define business model in any number of ways. But actually, to me, that's the most simple sort of definition I use for myself. A model is what helps you get to the big vision that you're painting. So what is it? And realistically, given climate tech as a space, given that most of y'all are early stage, things don't always quite work out that way, right? Regulatory environment changes. Something about your competitive landscape changes. Something about your product doesn't exactly work out the way that it was supposed to. Something about what your customers thought they wanted and what they actually want changes. We know this, like startups, the one thing that you folks know how to do better than anybody else on the planet is to pivot. So you know that it's not always the straight line that you articulate in a fundraising pitch. So market potential is great to be able to put out there almost as a way to substantiate your business case and really highlight what the opportunity is that exists. But you need to be able to, at every stage, bring clarity on what is your model. And the reason I say this, not because it's intuitive that, yeah, if you're going to an investor, obviously you have to be able to talk about the model, but I think what it tells us, and again, I'm going to speak from my perspective here and maybe Shruti's, but what it tells us is, how well do you understand your market? How well do you understand your consumer? How well do you understand your competitive advantage? Net TLDR, folks, what we're looking for is clarity. The idea is not that we know more than you. Actually, in more cases than not, we don't. But we want to be able to understand, how well do you know? Because that's the conviction that we'll be betting on, given that you're so early stage, given that there are no revenue numbers right now to make your case for you. So what are some questions? Apart from the TAM and SAM, who's your customer? Now, the answer to this could be very simplistically, oh, I'm a B2B model, so it's industry. Who within industry? Who specifically? Who are these people? What is it that they're actually going to be looking to do when you go to them for your business? Why will they pay for this? I know this is a question I ask myself a lot. No matter how completely bowled over by the tech I am sometimes, I always bring it down to, why will somebody pay for this? There has to be a reason. What am I not seeing? And what's your GDM? I mean, this is a word everybody knows. Sorry for using very cliche terms, but really, how will you go to market? Given that you are early stage, how are you going to try and break into the entire arena? How are you going to try and expand it? What is your strategy overall? What's your revenue model? And beyond revenue model, of course, depending on what sector you're in, this could be so different. It could be a per unit thing. It could be an installation plus servicing thing. It could be a subscription model as well in some cases. It could be a carbon credits thing, whatever it is. You know this, do talk about it. But more importantly, what makes you believe that this particular pricing or this particular model is actually going to work? And the best way for us to understand that is early adopters. Who are some of the people who, even if it's not commercial, even if it is just at a pilot stage, who are some of the people who have actually bet on what you've built and said, yeah, I'm going to try this out. I am totally okay to try this out. So who are your early adopters? Are you telling that story? And are you telling it early enough in your pitch? And basis this, then of course, what's your SOM? Because when you connect the three, usually one of the things that people do is they show their TAM, SAM, SOM in one particular slide. And that's great. But in conversations, when I'm actually in the room with these founders, what I'm trying to understand is, how are you linking up your revenue model to everything, all the insights that you have about your pricing and model and why it works to your SOM? Because again, what I'm looking for is clarity. I'm not the expert here. You are. What are your current unit economics? So many people don't talk about this. We ask, and when we ask, usually the answers are either there, or another answer that I usually get is, will get back to you. Have these answers at the back of your hand. You know this already. That's the one thing I will keep reiterating throughout this time that I have with you. If you have it, know when to use it, know when to share it. But again, more importantly, how do your unit economics validate your model? The conviction that you shared that, this particular model or this particular pricing actually is what is going to help me crack into the market. Is your unit economics starting to show that in some way, shape, or form? It won't do it entirely at an early stage, but is it showing some indication, some early indicator? You're looking at this. Help us see that too. What will keep your customers coming back to you, even the ones that you've done pilots with, even the ones that you've done non-commercial pilots with? What's really going to make somebody come back to you and say, yeah, this works for me? What have you seen? What have you heard? We want to know. We want to know what your customer feedback is, because user centricity in any business, of course, but in climate tech more so, because people are not naturally inclined to, take this up. User centricity is key. So we want to know what you've understood about your customer, how have you acted on it, and thus what the customer feedback has been. Will they endorse you to others? Let's say you did a pilot trial with somebody, some small textile manufacturer, let's say. It's not a commercial trial, it's a pilot trial. And maybe for their own financial reasons, I think they're sort of hedging their bets on giving you a purchase order for a commercial trial or whatever it is that you want to call it. So many things happen, right? It's not that simple. Would they at least recommend you to other people that they may know? Other textile manufacturers in the area, other factories? Does that happen? Is it happening? If it has happened, why is it happening? Again, so I think a lot of times, and maybe this is something that we do, and actually let me not use the word we, I'll use the word I. A lot of times I'm not asking these questions right up front and center. Sometimes I'm almost getting to it towards the end, but I'm hoping to be able to hear about it very intuitively right in the beginning. It would be good to preempt some of these questions that are there on investors' minds. And I think that could change the game in a lot of different ways. But finally, how will you differentiate from your competitors? Because you do have some. They may not be in the exact space that you're in, probably because your technology is extremely new, extremely innovative, but you do have some. There is somebody out there who's competing for your business, maybe in a different shape or form. But one, who are they and do you know about them? And two, how are you differentiating from them? Is it a cost advantage? Is it an efficiency advantage? Is it something else altogether? Is it a reputational advantage? Again, you know this. Help us see it. And finally, once you've talked about your technology, You've had all of these answers to these questions in your minds. You've talked about your business model. You've got answers to all of these questions in your mind. You're sharing it where needed. The next big thing, what I call the big clincher, which investors will look for, especially equity investors will definitely look for, is how scalable are you? Is this a business that can grow, or is it something that will be a MSME, which is also okay, but I know investors look for it? What's your profitability runway? What will it take for you to be able to reach profitability? How will your unit economics, in your estimation, out of all the knowledge that you have and all the market feedback that you've gathered, how do you think those unit economics, those margins are actually going to evolve with scale? And look, again, funders are of different types, right? So for instance, I'm a grant funder. There are equity funders. Avaana is an equity funder, of course. There are also debt funders. Depending on what type of funder you're really talking to, this list can become a lot longer or a lot shorter, right? If you're talking to equity, they might also ask you things like, hey, what's your cap table? Or, what's the valuation you're really thinking about? And so I won't get into the nuances of that, but I think net, what you really need to be able to show is you do have a plan, and it's a calculated plan to be able to get to a stage where you will be net positive and you will be able to make profits. And these are some indicative questions that, again, you have answers to. From the profitability runway, which I think is a short-term objective as far as scale is concerned, you'll start to talk about your growth strategy. You want to paint a picture about how will you expand into other markets and target segments, even over time. And maybe the answer to this is, hey, I want to capture this market first, and I'm going to really focus my energies on this for the next, let's say, 2 years. But then after that, here's what I hope to be able to do. Because by then, I will have enough evidence in category number 1 to be able to apply it to category number 2. Some vision of how you are thinking about this. It doesn't need to be hyper concrete, because it can't be. But how are you thinking about scale? What are some of the partnerships that you might require to do this? Are these government partnerships? Perhaps, I don't know. Are they large-scale industrial partnerships? Perhaps. What are some financial projections? Do you have projections? Have you thought of them? Even if they are, scratch notes somewhere, do those numbers make sense? Have you really sat down with those numbers instead of just creating a matrix that has been given to a funder because they asked for it? What do those projections look like? Do they make sense? And finally, what's your big vision? Who do you hope to become as a company? Not today, but I think in the grand big future, what do you want to be known for? And because all of y'all are climate tech, and irrespective of the funder that you will talk to, you will get asked this: what is the climate impact that you will hope to create? Is it going to be incremental in nature? Is it going to be exponential? Is it going to be a core to your core, or just a side benefit that, by the way, happens? You have to be able to paint the big picture. The big picture is probably what you folks started with in the first place, when you even had the kernel of an idea that this is what you wanted to build. And you've refined it over time. Maybe you've refined it every week or every month. Help us see that. It's not about the here and now. And that's the one thing I want to leave everyone with, if it makes sense. But you're approaching a funder for funding for your here and now, yes. There is something very specific that you want to be able to do. Yes, I understand that. But help us see beyond the here and now. I think one caution, like just a word of caution that I would put in here is, there seems to be an estimation that investors, VCs, impact funders, they want to look for big numbers. Sure, but don't be unrealistic with your scale timelines or your strategy. If you can't substantiate it with data, with evidence, because the tables that you share and the calculations and the projections that you share, we actually do go through them. If you can't substantiate it, it's not real. Don't share it. Put something in front which you can back, even if it is not the big number that you thought or you think that this investor is looking for. That's actually okay. So how do you bring this all together? These are a lot of questions to have answers to. Not everything can be in a pitch deck. Not every conversation is 40 minutes long. Sometimes you get 15 minutes with an investor, and that's all you have. Can't really write a thesis book on this and carry that around. How do you bring it together? You tell a story. Yes, it's about all the evidence and the data and your insights and all of that. But actually what we're looking to hear is a story. And the framework that I actually want to share with you, and I hope that you find it helpful, is one that I have found really helpful. It's the one that has kept me extremely engaged. It is what has enabled me to ask better questions rather than the ones that I was hoping to see in the conversation or the deck where it didn't come through. Talk about who you are. Start there. Most of us, and I will hazard the guess for that to be almost 90 to 95%, most of us don't do this. We start right into, we are so and so, and this is what we're doing, and this is the technology that we're building, and that technology piece then carries on for the next 15 minutes. Very few people actually start about themselves. Who are you? Start with a personal story. Who are you? Why are you doing this? Why this problem? Why specifically? Help investors get to know you, one, as a person, as a founder, because if you remember, I said this right at the beginning, that as early stage founders, one of the first things that we are looking for is the founder. Help us get to know you. And help us get to know you as somebody who is motivated to do this for very real reasons, motivated to do this for the long haul, not as something that is piecemeal. Or we want to see, and investors love this, right? So I heard somebody say this, I won't name the individual, but I was talking to this gentleman who's also an investor at a very big VC firm, and he said, you want founders who are willing to attack the problem for the next 10 years of their lives. Because the first couple of years, it's not going to work. And they're going to fail, and they're going to fall into the trough of sorrow. And then they're going to claw their way out of it. They will find a solution out of it, and then, find a way to make it work, make 1,000 pivots along the way, but they will make it work. Help investors see you as that person, assuming that you are that person, that this problem statement is genuinely very close to your heart, and that you are willing to spend the next decade of your life building it and building it till you're able to crack it in a way that creates incredible climate impact, which I think the world really needs right now. Go into what you're solving. You've talked about yourself, got them to get to know you a little bit personally. Now get into the problem statement very quickly. Here's the problem that I see. Here's why it's a problem to begin with. Here's how long it has been a problem for. Here's why it needs a solution. Here are some solutions that already exist. Here is why those solutions, existing ones, don't actually work. Now let me tell you about my product, or my technology, or my service model innovation. Lay the groundwork. Lay the groundwork. Before you even get into your tech, lay the groundwork. Talk about your product, talk about your technology, and remember, simple, not simplistic, don't dumb it down, don't over-explain, but make it as simple as for me to intuitively, logically understand how this fundamentally works. I may not understand the nuances of fluid dynamics, for instance, but if you were to tell me how it exactly solves the problem, I will. And then finally, connect the dots. Connect the dots to really show how will this address the problem at the end of all things, the problem that you articulated right here. Once you've done that, talk about the why now. Now you can present your understanding of, okay, here's what the market size looks like, right? The timing, you need to be able to talk about why now is the best time for you to come to the market with the innovation that you have. Why now? Why could this not have succeeded 5 years ago? Why will it not be better placed to succeed 5 years later? Why now? What's the timing? What's the urgency? What are you feeling from your customers? What you're hearing from customers? What is some market research that you may have done before or during your MVP process that really sort of gave you conviction that, yes, this needs to be there? And what is the potential? And this is where your TAM, SAM, and SOM backed off your revenue model and your unit economics and all of that. This is where all of that comes in. Talk about your competitive moat. What makes you different outside of all the other people who are doing either the same thing or very similar things or similar-ish things? What's your moat? Because just by the way, it's not just your patent. And again, I see a lot of founders do that. My competitive moat is that I have a patent and it can never be replicated. Yeah, that's not true. What else makes you different? What else makes you stand apart? What's your first mover advantage? Because whatever it is that you've created, this brilliant, amazing, incredible innovation that you've put together, there is some advantage to it that others don't. And that's in your mind, and you know, because that's where you started. But are you actively calling it out in front of investors? This is my first mover advantage. Here's the evidence for it. Share your early customer your testimonials. Even like I said, the free pilots that sometimes climate tech founders need to be able to do. But what are they saying about your product? What did your innovation help their business? How did that happen? Did it reduce their costs? Did it increase their efficiency? What are those testimonials? What are things that can make your case for you? So other people talking about you rather than you talking about you. And finally, how will you win? And that's where you close your case. Talk about your model. Talk about your scale strategy. Talk about the big questions that you have on your mind, maybe some risks that you're already thinking about. But really, really go deep there. Because this is the part that will make an investor go from this to this. Right? Talk about everything that you know that tells you that it is going to help you succeed. Make sure that it's substantiated by data. And once you've painted that entire picture, talk about your team, right? Because it's not just with early stage startups, and I can at least say this for myself, it's not just about the founder or the founders, it's also about the teams that you have. Because we know that being a founder is a really tough job. You cannot do everything on your own. So have you been able to get the right team together with the right skills, with the right competencies, with the right experiences? Talk about your team. This is the team, the winning team on the R&D side, the winning team on the business development side, the winning team on the regulatory side. Talk about your team. Talk about the advisors who you might be working very closely with. Because that tells us when you have a problem, who are you going to problem solve? Right? Talk to us about your advisors. Essentially, you want to paint a really winning picture, assuming that you have one, to your investors saying, this is what I got. So everything that I'm saying that I will do, I will do. I've got everything I need to be able to do it. So look, sounds simplistic, or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But I always think of fundraising pitches like stories. Outside of all the data and all the different points, and I know I was the first one in my first couple of slides hitting on all of those questions, right? You should have answers to this and this and this and this. I think the assumption that I'm working with is that you know answers to that already. So your pitches, your decks, your conversations don't have to be in that format. Your pitches and your conversations need to be a story of you, a story of your vision, a story of your potential. And this framework, I feel like, is the easiest one. You'll find many others. Like there are so many other folks, investors and founders alike, who talk about this. But if you were to ask me, this is the one that I would use, hands down. And this is the one that I have seen the best founder conversations I've really had, even at an early stage. This is sort of the framework that they use as well. Once you've done this, and now comes the big mother load of an ask, end with your funding ask and make it stick. And this is not actually about the money or the amount of money that you're asking for. It could be 50 lakhs, could be 16 crores. I don't know. What this is about is actually why you think this investor needs to be able to come onto your table. If you haven't already, do your research. Hand to heart, and you don't have to answer this for me. When you send a cold email or you get introduced to an investor through somebody, or you make a pitch, or you reach out on LinkedIn, whichever channel that you have to be able to hustle on fundraising, how many times have you actually done research on who this person is? What is their organization? What are some theses? What are some past investments that they've made? Who are some past founders that they've supported? How many times? I don't know the answer to this, but I imagine it's not very high. And look, the nuances, like I said, whether it's an equity funder or a grant funder or a debt funder, the nuances of your pitch will change. But what doing research is going to help you do is actually tailor your pitch. I have sometimes, by the way, received pitch decks that are meant for equity investors. And it sort of boggles me as to why that even happens. But I understand. I think if I were to place myself in the other person's shoes, I get it. You're probably sending a million fundraising pitches out every single day because you need the capital and you needed it yesterday. But I think a little bit of time and attention on this could actually help you tailor your pitch better, help it land better. And that's the only objective out of an exercise like that. Before you even made the funding ask, my personal recommendation would be to articulate how you think that investor, this particular investor, whoever it is that you're talking to, how will they be a critical part of your journey? Why do you think they specifically will be a great partner to your vision? It could be the sectors that they've operated in, or the oodles of experience that they have, or the organization that they're associated with, or are at a partner at, or the founder of, or whatever. Could be a multitude and a myriad number of reasons, right? But you will have those reasons, I imagine. Have you shared those reasons? But this is why I feel like you would be best placed to come in now. Please do share that before you even put the number on the table. And yes, then articulate your funding ask, but be very, very sharp about what is it going to help you do. Like I said, we walk into these rooms wanting to know more, hungry to know more, hoping to be able to find a founder, a solution that is going to disrupt the world as we know it. While there's a monetary ask associated to that, sharpness helps. Sharpness gives us confidence that you've thought this through. And not just in the immediate term, but I think overall on the pathway towards your larger vision, like your long term, what is this funding going to help you do? Is it going to help you, I don't know, create PMF? If so, why? How? Is it going to help you create an MVP? Maybe you're not there yet. You've just done some very early stage, whatever, but you need to be able to create an MVP to do pilots. Sure. Tell me that. Is it going to help you validate your market? How? Why? Try to make this as articulate as possible so that they understand where they are coming in and if that's probably the best fit for them at this stage or not. And finally, ask and listen to feedback. It's possible that the immediate outcome is not what you were hoping for at the end of all things. But at the very best, very, very best, you might actually walk away with something like a blind spot that you had, right? And somebody actually pointed it out to you and it's going to help you think about it deeper. But at the very least, it'll help you walk away with a slightly more long-term, non-transactional relationship with this investor. They may not be funding you today, but they might actually have that conversation with you again in 6 months. So yeah, at the end of all things, that's where I will pause and would love to take some time for questions. I know where we have 10 minutes, Shrishti, so I'll stop sharing maybe, but would love to take questions if any. I believe there are some on chat as well. Shrishti, could you help me navigate?
Sure. So we have collated questions from the chat as well as from the Google form that everybody had filled. So I think we can begin with some of the questions. I think the first round of question is that how can startups effectively estimate and present market size to attract investors?
Yeah, Shruti, do you want to take a bash at that?
Yeah, so I think Alankrita spoke about the TAM, SOM, and SAM, but it is slightly beyond that. For example, if you've done some pilots, there would be certain industries that are uptaking your solution or product more than rest of the industry. So how are you also bringing that into your pitch? Painting a picture of the problem statement for these industries, and therefore this is the gap that you're solving for, is probably helpful. But yeah, Alankrita, if you want to add to that.
No, I would love to understand, Shrishti, who asked this question. Would love to maybe just get some more context.
So, Ankita, we've actually collated these questions on the basis of Google Forms, so exact details we don't have as of now.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, sure. I think so. We also have some questions from the chat from Jessica saying, based on your experience, can you share an example of a fundraising pitch that effectively balanced technology, business fundamentals, and scale? So, what made it stand out?
Hi, Jessica. I believe we've met before, actually, but I think it's a mix of the three things that I spoke about. And the best example that I can share is actually Indra Water. And I'll have to, pardon me for saying that name out loud, but I was recently and that pitch was actually not made to me. They're a part of Facts portfolio, but this pitch was actually made to somebody else. I was in the room for that. And it effortlessly told that story, effortlessly touched upon all three things without over detail, but just enough detail for the investor to actually ask more questions, try to probe deeper, which is also what you want investors to do. It can't be a one-sided conversation. It has to be a two-way one. So how are you really arousing curiosity for them to come to the table, move forward and say, okay, but tell me more about this and what about that? I think it was a great example. I'm not sure how helpful this is because I can't really show you what that pitch looked like or how that conversation went. But effectively, Jessica, it did boil down to the three things I spoke about. They did talk about their tech, but before they even got into that, they talked about themselves. They talked about the problem, then they got into the tech, they talked about the model, they talked about customer feedback, they talked about their scale strategy. It was just a very, very well-rounded conversations that I think enabled the investors in the room to ask better questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Alankrita.
Great. I think the other question that we can take is, what are some of the common misconceptions about achieving product market fit for climate tech startups?
Yeah, I think the first misconception would be that product market fit comes easy. It doesn't. And I think that's what I meant when I said that climate tech solutions are often long gestation. Depending on the segment that you're in, it takes time to not demonstrate product market fit, but to be able to get to a stage where you're starting to catch steam and catch traction. So that's definitely number one. And I think that misconception probably exists on both sides of the table. But the other thing that I've also often found is sometimes people do believe that it's easy to get to product market fit if the innovation is absolutely mind-blowing. And the reason I feel like it's a very big misconception is I will lead it back to user centricity. You could have, let's say, a great agri-based carbon credits trading program, and there are a few of those in today's day and age. But is it a great model? Yeah. Is it something that could potentially work? And depends on how you're channeling that model, right? So one model could be that the credits are basically being received directly by the agrarian communities. Another one could be where it is being received by you, and so many models there. So is it an interesting model, interesting innovation? Yes. Is it something I'd love to learn more about out of curiosity as an investor? Yes. Is it something that necessarily, because it's a great, interesting innovation, will find product market fit? I would say no, I don't think so. I think that will really come down to how well do you know these agrarian communities that you're working with? And I'm using the whole carbon credits piece as an example, but how well do you know what they want? How well do you know that this is something that is going to stick with them? As you start to scale, you might establish the platform, you might establish the product, but as you start to scale, would you be able to bring more of them along with you? How long will it take for you to be able to do that? I think the answers to those questions are very important. And in some cases, I've found that the conversation is unable to address those questions at all. So the answer to can PMF be reached is not that simple. But yeah, I mean, I think there are many, many, many misconceptions, but this is one that user centricity really is one that sticks at the top of my mind. I think that is the road and the pathway to PMF at the end of all things.
And I mean, if I might just add, I think a lot of folks also think if you do a couple of initial pilots, that means PMF is achieved. But most often, I think in our experience, we've also seen pilots also result in optimization and leading to other industries. So that and also breaking the right, I mean, figuring out the right unit economics. Creating demand is not just enough, but also having the right unit economics in place. That makes sense is when you probably hit PMF. A lot of people just construe that demand leads to PMF, but that's not the case. Yeah.
Okay, I think there's one question specifically on, what are some examples of a good vision statement? Yeah.
I think this is a much longer conversation, but in short, I believe this is Rahul. In short, Rahul, I would say something that is ambitious enough yet realistic enough. And I know this is a very generic statement to make, but an authentic statement that tells the story of where you want to be able to hit while showing the ambition that you have in that regard, but at the same time not painting an unrealistic picture is possibly a vision statement that makes sense. And I've seen vision statements on all ends of the spectrum. I'm sure all of you have as well in your own peer community as founders, as climate tech founders. I'm sure you have. I think an easy way to think about this, Rahul, rather than hearing it from me. I mean, I have my perspective, and there might be a bias, but think of all the vision statements you have seen in your peer community, in founders that you admire, in startups that you admire. What really catches your attention? And I think it's just a space for you to reflect and think about what would yours be that could make a very strong case.
Great. I think with that, we're also on time. I would like to thank everybody for joining today's masterclass. A special thank you to our speaker, Ms. Alankrita Khera, for your insightful session on crafting compelling fundraising narratives in the climate tech sector. Shruti, thank you so much for joining us as well. Today's discussion highlighted the importance of telling a complete story, one that not only showcases a startup's potential impact and scalability, but also emphasizing on knowing your customers, defining a clear revenue model, discussing unit economics, incorporating customer feedback as well. So these elements are essentially key to inspiring investor confidence, and I'm sure this session will surely enable all our participants to create investor-ready pitches that showcase the full potential of their climate tech innovations. I would also like to thank all the participants for your active engagement, for putting in questions in the chat box, and for actually, also helping us in smooth coordination and facilitation of this session. We hope that today's session has left you with actionable strategies to take your climate tech venture to the next level. We encourage you to apply for the startup challenge. The link, we'll be putting it in the chat. It's also all across our LinkedIn. And thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.